now available in paperback and e-readers. Isis, Bride of Dracula. Goddess Next Door and John Haynes team up to take on the Dark Vampire in this action-packed Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Bride of Dracula in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. Last week I watched several videos by Diversity in Comics and Yellow Flash where they roasted the final issue of Mariko Tamaki's She-Hulk run. And what I saw in that issue in the videos I watched was a story that was far below the standards of a Marvel comic. Now, in this issue of She-Hulk, I saw a story with factual inaccuracies and a story that clearly showed me that Mariko Tamaki did absolutely no research on New York City and no research on the New York City criminal justice system. Now, Jennifer Walters is supposed to be a lawyer. And in this issue of She-Hulk, we get some scenes where this mutant character, Byrne's mother, was supposed to have been arrested in this assault by these anti-mutant bigots. And in this assault, one of these guys takes a hammer to Byrne's mother's car. She defends herself, and according to Mariko Tamaki, she gets 5 years in prison. Now, that's not how the criminal justice system here in New York works. Now, usually in this type of assault, it's usually a misdemeanor, and a person usually is processed through central booking, and they're usually given a desk appearance ticket, and usually they have to come back, and then usually if they have a lawyer like Jennifer Walters, they get community service. I know this because when I was writing my novel, The Legendary Mad Matilda, which was supposed to be about an African-American goth who was hosting a rave, and then the rave got busted, she got arrested, and after that, she had to go through central booking, and then she had to make a plea when she was arraigned. And at that arraignment, she had a lawyer who managed to get her released on her own recognizance. And then after that, she had a meeting with the assistant district attorney, and the assistant district attorney didn't even want to prosecute the case because it was a waste of their time. Because here in New York City, usually district attorneys don't want to deal with small matters like this because it's not something that they can consider something they want to go to trial with. So usually they try to plead these cases down to the point where they can just get them to plead guilty to a lesser charge, and then the person got community service. But in Legendary Mad Matilda, the ADA just pleaded it down, and then she got 6 months of community service, and that was the end of that matter. And that's something I learned from doing research online, just basic research, basic Googling, and basic reading of different websites. And this is something Mariko Tamaki should have been doing before she wrote a single issue of this She-Hulk run. If you're going to do a story about a lawyer and there's a case that they're having, you would think you would learn the ins and outs of the New York City criminal justice system. Now, I did that research for the Legendary Mad Matilda and that sequence in the story, but Mariko Tamaki didn't do that for this issue of She-Hulk. And that's really embarrassing because I'm a small independent publisher, and I'm showing that I have more passion for my craft than someone who is currently working at Marvel Comics, one of the biggest publishers of comic books in the comic book industry. I'm showing that I'm truly concerned about my work, and I want to make sure that it is the best quality possible. But your Mariko Tamaki is showing that she doesn't care enough to focus on those types of details that would make the story more compelling for the reader. Now, there was another factual inaccuracy that your Mariko Tamaki posted in this issue of She-Hulk, and this factual inaccuracy relates to Times Square because there's a sequence in the comic where this limo is driving down Times Square. Now, I've lived in New York for all my life, 44 years, and I know that Times Square is not a place where you can drive around anymore. And I know this because during the era of Michael Bloomberg's mayoralty, he changed Times Square to a pedestrian walkway area. So you can go anywhere from, I say, about 47th to about 42nd, and it's blocked off with a pedestrian walkway. It's all pedestrian walkways, and in those pedestrian walkways all you're going to see are tourists sitting down in different chairs, and you're going to see people walking around. And then you're going to see people in costumes who are there trying to get pictures from tourists and get money from tourists. And you're going to see the topless desnudas who are around in these topless with body paint on and G-strings, and they're wearing headdresses. And that's what you're going to see in Times Square. And also you're going to see are an army of police officers patrolling Times Square. This is something that I featured in my story, Easting Little Girl Lost. And I featured that in Easting Little Girl Lost because I wanted to make a commentary on Times Square, and I also wanted to make a commentary on how dangerous Times Square was, because I used to walk down Times Square sometimes when I would do errands, and sometimes when I would go visit the Toys R Us that used to be in Times Square. So I knew what was going on in Times Square, and that's why I was able to write about it in the story Easting Little Girl Lost, because I knew the area and I knew what went on in the area, so I could accurately describe what was going on in the area, what was going on in the streets in the area, and give people a clear, accurate picture of Times Square in that story. But your Mariko can't do that because she doesn't do research. And because she does not do research, we have people driving limos down Times Square. We have guys turning over limos in Times Square. And that wouldn't happen in New York City with all of those police officers in Times Square and patrolling Midtown Manhattan. Because Midtown Manhattan is usually filled with cops everywhere. So that wouldn't really happen, even in a fictional place like the Marvel Universe, because any writer who does their research knows that Times Square is usually a place filled with cops. And when I was writing Easting Little Girl Lost, I wrote knowing about Times Square, and I knew that usually a lot of the hassles and the troubles usually start between the Desnudas performers or the costume performers, and I used that as part of the setup for some of the conflict in my story. But this writer didn't do any of that. She's got this prom going on, and all of it, again, makes no sense. You have She-Hulk and Patsy Walker just standing there talking, and none of it is moving anything forward. And then we have this bigot character, and I look at that story, and again, it just showed me this writer didn't do any research on the area. She did not do any research on the community. She did not do any research on the Marvel Universe. And it all showed in this story, which was far below the standards of even an independent self-publisher. That's how embarrassing this issue of She-Hulk was. I mean, these SJW comics are bad, but this SJW comic is so bad, it is even far below the standard of a self-publisher, in the fact that this writer showed that she had no passion for the character, she had no passion for the craft of writing, she had no passion for even maintaining any sort of standard as related to story. Because for a writer to submit this kind of work and believe that this is something good, that shows that this writer has lost all care for their craft. Because I would not even think to submit a piece of work that bad to someone. And for an editor to sit there and say and accept this work shows how far low the standards have fallen at Marvel Comics. Because any other publisher, trade publisher, would look at that story and say to themselves, this story is far below any sort of standard. I see you have facts inaccurate. I see you have details that are wrong. I see a story that desperately needs either to be revised or you just need to start over. That's how low the standards have fallen when I look at that issue of She-Hulk. That shows how that people at Marvel truly do not care about the quality of the comics that they publish or the quality of the publications they produce. Because to let a book this bad pass, that just shows me how bad things are as related to editorial. Because instead of terminating Mariko Tamaki based on her horrific performance on this She-Hulk book, Marvel's editors have decided to reassign her to the X-23 comic book. Now, here is a comic book writer who has shown us that she cannot take 12 to 13 issues and give us 3 story arcs in an overreaching story arc, because that's the standard that a quality comic book writer can produce in. If you give a comic book writer 12 issues or 13 issues, they should be giving you 3 story arcs in an overreaching story arc. 9 issues of Mariko Tamaki's run is exposition, and the final issue is just a complete mess. But Marvel's editors believe that Mariko Tamaki is a qualified person, and if she is supposed to be qualified to work at Marvel Comics, then it shows me that the bar at Marvel Comics is not only hit the ground, it is starting to burrow down to the Earth's molten core. And this is far below the standard that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby established for the brand. As I see it, Marvel's editors all need to be fired, because if this is the type of publication they want to come out of their brand, this reflects negatively on that brand, and it's a complete embarrassment to a subsidiary of the Disney Corporation to have a brand producing publications far below the standard of even a small independent publisher on CreateSpace. I mean, C.B. Cebulski, he really needs to get on things, because if this is the type of book that he wants to have with his name on it, then it's going to show me that he really doesn't care about standards as related to Marvel Comics. Now, at SJS Direct, I care about standards. And when people told me about typos in my books back in 2009 and 2010, I made efforts to learn more about editing to improve the quality of my books. And at this point, they are far better than when I started publishing in 2002, where these days I have books with minimal errors, if there are any, and that's all due to me being dedicated to my craft and wanting my books to be the very best. And what's sad about Marvel is that here you have a billion-dollar subsidiary of Disney, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, and the editors there don't have any standards in terms of quality as related to their publications, even with all of those billions of dollars. What's really sad is a small independent guy working from a laptop in his South Bronx apartment has higher standards than the publishers at a multi-billion-dollar corporation. That this small independent publisher, SJS Direct, is willing to make efforts to produce higher quality publications than what Marvel is producing right now. Because what they produced in that She-Hulk issue wouldn't pass my standard, because it's just far below my standard. And I'm just a small indie guy, and I'm going to say, look, this can't go out because it reflects badly on my image, it reflects badly on my brand, and it reflects badly when customers pick this book up and see a book of that level of quality. I would not accept that issue of She-Hulk in the script stage if it came to SJS Direct. I would not accept it, because that's just not what I consider quality. And I wouldn't accept many of the what they call SJW Marvel titles at SJS Direct, because those books are far below the standard in terms of storytelling, in terms of editing, and in terms of character and consistency. It's sad that my standard is higher than Marvel's standard, because it shows the difference between someone who cares about what they do and someone who doesn't care what they do. And it shows the difference. It's not resources that make a publisher a good product. It's the passion and care that the people make for that product. I urge anyone who had picked up that issue of She-Hulk to pick up a copy of Eastine Little Girl Lost on Smashwords, or pick up a copy of Legendary Mad Matilda if you have Kindle Unlimited. And you will see a clear difference between a writer who cares about the quality of their publications and the quality of what goes out of their publishing division versus a publisher who doesn't care. And again, it's embarrassing that I show more care for my products that I produce from a laptop in my South Bronx apartment than all the people who work at Marvel Comics, who must be at least 200 or 300 people, and these people are collecting paychecks at the expense of the Disney Corporation, and these people show how little they care about Marvel Comics, how little they care about Marvel's reputation, how little they care about Marvel's brand and how little they care about what they produce with that Marvel label on it. When I produce books on the SJS Direct imprint, I see it as a reflection of myself, and because I see it as a reflection of myself, I want to make sure that those books are of the highest standard in terms of quality, and I want to make sure that those books leave a lasting first impression on the reader that gives them an incentive to go out here and buy more books and then tell their friends about their books. The word of mouth that this She-Hulk book is getting is negative, and that negativity is one of the things that is leading to Marvel having the complete decline in sales. If I were working at Marvel Comics, Mariko Tamaki would not be working at Marvel Comics because the work she produces is far below the standard I would consider for a Marvel comic, because what I consider the standard for a Marvel comic is a book that is supposed to be of the highest quality and presents the superheroes that are supposed to be considered the gold standard for superheroes. What I saw in that issue of She-Hulk was not the gold standard as related to superheroes. It was the garbage standard as related to superheroes. And Marvel needs to start digging itself out of the gutter and aiming higher, because they can do better than substandard, and substandard should not be the standard for a Marvel comic. If the SJS Direct standard is the gold standard, then the Marvel standard should be the same level. It's sad. I mean, $1 billion company should be aspiring to do better and being the best, and not trying to settle for less. If you'd like to try Eastine Little Girl Lost, you can click the link and it'll take you to Smashwords, where you can download a free copy. And if you want to try Legendary Mad Matilda, you can go to Kindle Unlimited and download a copy there. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.